Another video. Um, Hopefully this one's a short one. I'll try and make it as short as possible. I want to discuss a couple of things that tie into each other. One, nursing. The second thing being cow's milk, and how other mammals basically nurse their young. So it's pretty well known that all other mammals nurse their young up to a couple of years at least. In today's society, we've stopped nursing our young when it's become taboo to even nurse outdoors, like in public. It's just weird. We're trying to reset that. We're trying to rewrite that wrong again. Um, the second thing, which really blows my mind, is how, well, obviously, society takes the child away from the mother at a very young age, puts them in preschool, and this and this and that. And a lot of women do not breastfeed their children. So the funny thing is, when you do have a baby, the first thing you're supposed to do before the umbilical cord is cut. That's such an insane thing to do, by the way. There's a reason why you have to clamp it down and then cut it, and it's spongy. It's not supposed to be cut through. It's supposed to fall off when the baby is ready to detach. When you go through labor, your body is letting you know that both you and the baby have connected and communicate. Well, you've always been connected, but you've communicated enough to know that it's time. And once it exits that portal or enters through that portal and comes into the world, you're not supposed to sever that tie. This is why children cry the way they do. Babies cry. It's not just about getting oxygen and this and that and the light. It's not. It's severing that connection between the mother and child. So the first thing that's supposed to happen is breast milk. As, and you're not supposed, before you cut off the umbilical cord, which again you shouldn't cut off. It should fall off on its own. The second thing being, you know, as victims of the same system, we ended up leaving this connection with our mothers, uh, living in this duality and being disconnected with mothers. This is why for so many decades now it's been like mommy issues that people have had, because they've been severed away from the female connection that they had that brought them into this world, the feminine energy. It's not about females, it's that feminine energy. So once that is severed, it leads us to do what? Of course, we're going to suckle on the teat of cows. So the reason that cow's milk was actually introduced is, if you look back into the ancient times of, like Egyptian times, Isis was breastfeeding. There are pictures, there are documents of Isis, or, well, documents, but there are pictures, and there's a lot to show. I think it's like a picture of even Isis breastfeeding Horus. Um, so about 60 years ago, it wasn't unusual for us to be able to breastfeed our children up to 3 to 4 years old, because that's how a lot of mammals go up to 6, 7 years old. The longer it takes for the mammal to grow, the longer the breastfeeding is supposed to continue, because it has to do with the balance of the hormones. So if a cow, for example, you see a calf go from a tiny little thing to a gigantic, massive beast, it's because of the amount of hormones that are present in the cow's milk to nurture the child. So it's the animal's offspring. And the same thing goes with humans, because we actually take a longer period of time to grow. The amount of hormones in there are a lot less. But in the Renaissance times, uh, the French, some of the upper class, a lot of the upper class French were too, they felt that it was beneath them to breastfeed their own child. So they would actually have other people that worked for them. The body started producing milk and being around again. Everything is connected. So when the child was demanding milk and needed nurturing, the woman, the midwife or the wet nurse or whatever they're called, that would be there, not midwife, the wet nurse would end up milking, or get offering her milk and producing milk and offering her milk for the child in need when the mother wasn't doing it. So what ends up happening is that transitioned into over cow's milk. So this wasn't a natural thing where a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is happening for so many years." No, this started throughout after the Renaissance times. So this started well past the times of intelligence and interconnection, which I like to look at as, like, for example, as an example, the ancient Egyptian times. So when you've been weaned off of your own mother's milk, and then you've been given a cow's milk that is intense, so it's got an intense amount of hormones, um, there is an emotional attachment when somebody tells you don't drink milk. There is an emotional attachment. That was one of my biggest, hardest things to give up when I was becoming a vegan. And it was because I was thinking I had to give it up until I realized somebody told me, they're like, oh, you like baby cow milk? And I started seeing a tiny little baby cow, like not a calf, but a baby cow. I started realizing that this isn't meant for me, and I didn't have to give it up. It just made sense not to touch something that's not meant for me. So I just want to kind of show you guys a little bit of a few pictures of mammals and their young, and just remind you, if you're about to have a baby, or if you know someone who's having a baby, please remind them that this is crucial. You know, continue nursing your child. It's so important. This is your connection. Orangutans go up to, I think, 6 years or more. Yeah, look right there. This is a beautiful connection between mother and child.